Hi folks, I'm Ignatiy Vishnevetsky. I'm filling in this week for A.A. Dowd on Film Club, and here with me I've got Katie Rife.
Hello.
We will be talking about Corneliu Porumboiu's deadpan neo-noir, The Whistlers.
Welcome to Film Club.
I can't think of another national cinema, at least a contemporary national cinema, that has done more with the subject of tedium than Romanian film, you know, the Romanian New Wave of the late 2000s, really playing a lot dramatically, sometimes comically, with duration, with basically testing the character's patience and in some way the audience's.
Yeah, sometimes.
But to pointed ends. And one of the most interesting directors to come out of that is Corneliu Porumboiu. He kind of had his breakthrough with 1208 East of Bucharest and then made Police Adjective, which is it's an experience. It's a deconstructed police procedural that really emphasizes some of the moral quandaries of police work, but also the absolute tedium of it. And so it's interesting to see him return in a film that is actually kind of a sequel to Police Adjective to the subject of cops and crime and drugs in The Whistlers, but then in a completely different register, a completely different mode of kind of deadpan noir. I don't even know if it's...
I would call this a neo-noir. It's not quite a heist thriller. There's elements of that, but you know, it's funny you talk about tedium because in another director's hands, this could have been a very bright, just a madcap, over-the-top film. It's got, you know, the plot is full of betrayals and double crosses and all the sort of stuff that you really could play in a very madcap way. But this film sort of tamps it down a little bit. That's not to say it's boring to watch at all.
Oh, it's kind of terse and zippy.
Yeah,
and it's
it
just
is
moving
zippy.
forward.
It is zippy, but it never goes full madcap crazy.
Yeah, well, I think it's partly the performances. You have very poker-faced, stone-faced performances, especially from the lead, Vlad Ivanov, who's a Romanian character actor, usually plays kind of authority figures or bad guys, cast as this cop who, you know, is this middle-aged Bucharest cop who gets involved with a businessman and the businessman's girlfriend, and he's, you know, kind of a bribe escalates into something completely different.
Businessman's a loose term.
Yeah. Leading up to the opening of the film, because parts of this sort of plays out backwards. It's in chapters.
It's non-linear, yeah.
Where he has to go to the Canary Islands to learn Silbogomero, a whistling code.
Which is really cool.
Created by the inhabitants of the island of La Gomera. It's a really wacky conceit to build a film around.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and they don't use a ton of the whistling language in the film. It's really more of an element of it than, I would say, you know, the overall theme. But the parts when they do use it are pretty cool. They have stretches that are subtitled, you know, whistling.
Subtitled whistling, yeah.
Yeah, it's really
always
cool.
Good.
Yeah. And they have also sequences, a good part of it is the main character, like you said, the cop. He's learning how to speak the language, and so, you know, you learn a little bit about how it works.
And the plot here is kind of convoluted.
Yeah, especially with the non-linear element. It's really not like, I would say this is one of those films that it's important to pay attention in the first half hour, but if you get to the first half hour and you go, wait, how does that person know that person? Just stick with it, because it does all become clear by the end, but it is complicated.
And again, there's so much stuff in the plot that may come across as kind of, you know, as very broad.
Yeah, zany. There's a mattress factory with 30 million stuffed in 2 mattresses.
And a motel that only plays opera.
Yeah.
But I think it is really kind of restrained by Porumboiu's direction, by his camera work is not showy. It always has some kind of intent behind it, but it tends to be kind of pretty naturalistic, even in terms of lighting. There's a lot of kind of funny stuff going on with sound in this film, and not just the whistling. The whistling is just one motif among lots of kind of interesting deployments of basically sound gags.
Yeah. The sound is, I think, the one area where the film lets itself loose a little bit. And you mentioned the lighting. I think the lighting was really interesting because this film is colorful. The Canary Islands setting is colorful, and even in Bucharest, a lot of the settings, there's a lot of cool work going on with color right here, but it's not Almodovar colorful. Yeah. And I think the lighting kind of tamps that down a little bit too.
A lot of the story, too, is it's interesting that it is really rooted in what are very kind of noirish archetypes.
Absolutely.
You have just an archetypal femme fatale, always glamorously smoking a cigarette next to a shaft of light.
Sunbathing. Yeah.
And, this kind of hard luck patsy who just wanted to make some money and is now wrapped up in all of this. You've got gangsters, you've got other corrupt cops.
Yep, everybody is purchasable in this film.
And yet, it's not taking itself seriously at all.
No,
but it's not playing it too broad.
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression that this film is boring or it takes like an interesting concept and stuffs it down into a box until it becomes, a slog, because it's not like that at all. It's just, it's more just the directorial approach.
Yeah.
That is, I think it was really interesting and different.
I found it quite funny, too.
Some of that comes down to the lead performance. He plays it very straight, but his straight-faced reactions to the zany things going on are very funny.
Yeah, he really underplays it.
And I know we didn't really talk a whole lot about the plot of the film beyond, you got cops and gangsters and femme fatales and the Canary Islands, the whistling language, and 30 million that everybody wants to get after. But honestly, one of the fun parts of watching this movie is putting together all the pieces, so I don't want to say too much about the plot.
I think a lot of what it's doing with the structure, with the chronology, is obviously reminiscent of a lot of Tarantino imitations from the late 90s, early 2000s. But
absolutely, particularly in the structure.
Yeah. But what it reminded me more of, and maybe it's because I know that it was a reference point, is the Coens. But it's sort of taking the plotting that you might find in wackier Coens films.
And the characters, too.
Yeah. Then directing it something, his style is so much more restrained than that, and so much even less varnished than the most kind of somber Coens films. But yeah, directing it in a very kind of somber style.
And I think that's interesting because, it's sort of like the style does create this world where you have these like kind of wacky heightened characters in these complicated timelines. But it's like what that would be like in real life. And that has its own sort of magic to it of like these like eccentric gangsters existing in a real space.
They're eccentric gangsters, but there aren't eccentric performances.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, that's all for this week. Thank you again for joining us, Ignatiy. It's always a pleasure.
Well, thank you for having me.
And please be sure to like and subscribe if you are watching us on YouTube, and join us again next week. We'll be back with more Film Club.